So we're going to look at tragedy, or more specifically, the structure and form of a tragedy, especially in a play, although this can apply to short stories, novels, other forms of literature as well. But before we do that, let's go for a little ride. Let's take a ride on a roller coaster. So here's the roller coaster car, and before you get on the roller coaster, you have to queue. And this is a bit boring. Could be a moment when you're calm and you're waiting in the queue. And then finally, you board the roller coaster car and it sets off. This is where things start to get complicated. You start riding the roller coaster and you become a bit scared because you're riding higher. You're starting to think, why did I come on this ride? It's starting to get really exciting, if a bit dangerous. Some people love this part. And then once you reach the top, the roller coaster starts to accelerate. At this moment, you're at the highest point of the roller coaster and you begin to fall. And you're falling rapidly, but also at the same time, you are returning to the beginning where you finally stop, unbuckle the seatbelt on your roller coaster car ride, and you get off and you walk away. Okay, so you've just ridden a roller coaster. What does that have to do with a tragedy? Well, firstly, you could think about that in terms of the effects a tragic structure will have on the audience. A tragedy, many people have tried to study this, first of whom was probably a Greek philosopher playwright called Aristotle in 335 BCE. He divided a play into 3 acts, and some people have called this Aristotle's pyramid or triangle. Another playwright and novelist and narratologist called Gustav Freytag from Germany in the 19th century devised a 5-act structure, and he gave them these 5 key terms, which I'm going to go through with you now. The exposition. This is a bit like the roller coaster, where you understand what the roller coaster looks like. You understand what it entails. In a story, this will be meeting the main characters and looking at the setting, just familiarizing yourself. Here is the key part of a tragic structure, because this is where the story becomes interesting. If a story just carried on flat, what would be the entertainment? What would be the value in the moral of the story? But here, we get a complication. Freytag missed this out here, but here you'd have a complication, something which makes the story interesting. And then the rising action takes place. Events take place, and the main character, if there is one, becomes embroiled, engaged with a problem. The problem reaches a climax. A very simple way of discussing the climax would be the scariest part of the story. I think a climax should actually be looking at the turning point in which a main character or the story occurs. And that's the whole point of a pyramid or this triangle, because here the rising action stops and takes a turn in direction. Then we have the falling action, where events happen where the protagonist either starts to win or to lose, and it finally hits ahead here with the denouement. Now, denouement refers to the untying of knots. That's what that word means. It comes from the French, to untie. And this story is not simple. If it was simple, it would be just one long piece of string, that's a metaphor, from beginning to end. But it's not. We have that complication like that I talked about here at the beginning, and that knot travels with us throughout the tragic story. The denouement refers to the untying of this knot, when all the events, the fate awaiting the protagonist resolves itself. Now, in a tragedy, you can have a resolution, but resolution doesn't have to mean a happy ending. It could simply mean that the knot is untied and the problem stops. Often a tragedy will mean the death of a main character or main characters. And that is your 5 main parts of the tragic structure. Freytag didn't just refer didn't develop his 5-act structure just for tragedies, but for a tragedy, we really think about the denouement as the conclusion which ends in the death or the failure of a protagonist, a main character, to solve their problems. What you should do is think about which stories fit this structure, and think about then more specifically which tragic stories fit this structure. Some very good examples are Shakespeare's tragedies, including Romeo and Juliet and Macbeth. Choose a main character and see how they fit in. Lastly, to be even more creative, take any story and rewrite it as a tragedy. Think about how the characters are introduced to you, how events occur to increase the tension. What could be a turning point? If there isn't one in the story, rewrite it, add one. The falling action, how does the turning point affect the falling action? How do the characters engage in the battle or the opposing elements? And then how does that complication resolve itself? This complication which occurred here just after the exposition, how did the characters untie those knots?